maybe you think to yourself, you watch these videos, maybe you've even seen somebody at an event who's up on stage and you think, man, it must be so great to have that ability to be able to present or be able to do public speaking come so easily to people. Well, I'm here and doing this video because I want to tell you, for me, it 100% has not been easy, to the point where even for me, up until my mid-20s, I had paralyzing stage fright. This has been a lot of work. It's been a long journey for me. But that's why I want to make this video, is because I want to share that journey. I want to share what I've learned along the way and all of the things that have made such the big difference for me, because I want you to be able to master becoming better at selling your work, at presenting it, at even doing public speaking if you want to, because it's just such an important part of your career. So I think just give me a few minutes, and I think you're going to learn a lot about how to get better at these things. Let's get into it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm your host, Steve Gates, and this is The Crazy One, the YouTube channel and podcast that helps you become more creative, become a better leader, and all sorts of other things. Now, what I want you to be able to do is, if you like this sort of video and if you want to be able to get more of it, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button and then hit that little bell so you get the latest content whenever that comes out. But today, what I want to do is I want to talk about selling and public speaking, because these are things that are really challenging. And like I said before, these are things that I've really struggled with. But what I want to do is I want to cover three different things, because I think there's really three different areas that I think are going to make the biggest difference, and they made the biggest difference for me. The first is going to be just some basics of, like, just what are some of the basic things, if you're working with a customer, if you're working with a client, to be able to help sell them and present your work in a much better way. But also, if you're going to be doing public speaking, how can you get better at that? Because for me, the two, and there is so much of this, are so completely related. And I think a lot of people will see them as being really separate, but I want to go through why I think they're a lot alike. Then from there, I want to talk about your style. Your style as in your personality. What do you want to be known for? And how do you want people to be able to remember you whenever you present, sell, or are on stage? But then also, just what are some of the basic things about your presentation style, of what are the things that you need to use to be at your best? And then finally, what I want to be able to do is to talk about just some of the most common mistakes, because there are a bunch. I've made all of them so many times, I'm sure I've forgotten. But just some of the most common things I want you to keep in mind, so that this is stuff that doesn't happen to you. But let's start with the basics, because like I said, there's just some simple things that I think a lot of people maybe don't think about or haven't realized that make a huge difference. The first one is again, no matter what you are doing, if you think you want to become better at presenting your work, or better at selling your work, or becoming a better public speaker, all of these things, and again, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is in their mindset. Because the mindset is, whenever I'm presenting, I'm just going to come in and show you something. Hey, here are a bunch of options, see what you think. There's not much authority, there's not much confidence, it's just sort of a presentation. Or what I want you to be able to do is to go in there with the mindset that you are selling. If this is about your work, you are selling your work. If you're doing public speaking, you are selling yourself, your expertise, your authority. And if you approach it that way, to be able to have a bit more of that entrepreneurial mindset, it makes a huge difference right as the foundation. So again, right from the beginning, we are going to approach this as, no matter what it is, we're going to use more of a selling mindset than just presenting. But a lot of it for me is that if you have created something, if you're creating a talk, a piece of work, no matter what it is, any of those things are going to be the most successful whenever they talk to a core human truth. Meaning that there is something that everybody can relate to. If I've designed something, I want it to make a problem everybody can relate to. If I'm going to be on stage and I'm going to be doing public speaking, I want to talk about things that everybody can relate to. But the way that I'll often do that is to set up the problem, find the core human truth, to be able to talk to people about that. But then what I do is then I can tell my story and make it personal, be able to make people connect with me. But what that does is it grounds it in context. Because if I just tell my story, if I don't find the human truth in it, maybe somebody connects with the work and maybe they don't. Maybe they connect with what I'm saying, maybe they don't. But that sort of thing, if they don't, then you lose the audience, you lose your client, your customer, whatever it is, because they're thinking, well, this isn't really something that I've experienced. And that's where we all start. We start by looking at ourselves and thinking, hey, can I relate to this? Hey, can I understand this? But that's why it's important to start with, what is the center the way it affected you, the way it would affect them, the way it would affect anybody. Because if you come from that and show that thinking, your speeches get so much better, your work gets so much better adoption because people understand that you're thinking about those things. Now from there, a big problem that I see, especially as we talk about selling your work, is that people just show up and say, ta-da, here's the end product, right? Like there's that old way of doing things like, oh, well, you give us a brief or you give us a problem and then we're going to go away and like work in a black box and do all this like mystical, magical stuff with people who have like interesting accents and then come back and reveal the outcome. I think that the day that if that ever worked, it is long gone. Because for me, it's about showing your thinking, taking them on a journey. Now, again, we'll start with selling. Like for me, I want to tell them, what was the brief? Just to remind them. Tell them what were the problems that we had with it, some of the challenges that we had to overcome. Be able to show them how did we think through that. Be able to show them what was the work that we did, and then how did we arrive at often one or two, maybe even three different outcomes. It sort of depends on the customer I'm working with. But again, if there's somebody who I feel like maybe they're going to have a hard time seeing something a little bit more innovative or seeing something a little bit bigger, yeah, I'm going to present them the one option that's so obvious. Like, this is what everybody thought we were going to do. Great, let's start there. Then let's move away from it a little bit. Do something a little bit more daring. Think it through a little bit more. Then finally, what I want to do is present that option that really goes after it, that really tries to be able to push the boundaries. Because whenever you do that, I'm taking them on the journey. But the most important thing that I'm doing in that selling motion is that if I've gone through that journey, I've shown my thinking, and this may sound really weird to a lot of people, what that work looks like honestly matters so much less. Because the work just becomes a visual representation of all the thinking I've done. It's the proof, it's the output where they go, oh, that's great, I see how you've done on this, and that led to that. If you don't take them on a journey, if you don't set up that work and you just say, hey, here's the end product, they're probably gonna make a mess, thrash around like a bull in a china shop, trying to find that thinking in what you did. But that's the thing, is if you bring them on that journey, make them a part of it, it's going to be so much better. Now, the same thing is going to be true for public speaking. That what I want to be able to do is to build on ideas. I want to be able to take them on a journey to set up, hey, here's the problem. Here's that core human truth. Here's how I related to it. Here's the situation that we're all in, and then what we can do about it. Again, if you just stand up there and rattle off a bunch of numbers or rattle off a bunch of facts, don't tell people a story, they're not going to remember anything. One of the most interesting things that I did was there was a study that was done, and maybe I'll get the exact numbers a little bit off. I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comments if I do, but what they basically said was they gave two presentations. One was a story, and one was just a bunch of facts, figures, numbers, percentages, all that stuff. They went back 2 weeks later, and they asked those same people to, hey, either tell me the story or recite those numbers. 75% of the people could remember the story, 15% of the people could remember the numbers. We remember stories because we relate to them, because we can internalize them. It gives it humanity. Numbers are just facts and figures, and our brains isn't as good, and it's not wired for most of us to be able to hold on to that stuff. So that's why stories and telling those stories is so important in doing both of these things. Now, the next part of it is, it's great to tell a story, but you need to make sure that everything in that story, whether you're selling your work or you're on stage, has a purpose. Trust me, there is nothing, and I mean nothing, that I do whenever I'm on stage or whenever I'm in front of a customer that happens by accident. Go back and watch one of my old keynotes. You'll see that the start of them always starts almost exactly the same way. There's a photo of me as a child on like the letterpress, and gee, isn't that great? There's some part of me talking about my work. Usually there's one of the photos of like Tim Cook or somebody at one of the Apple keynotes. There is that sort of thing talking about the podcast or talking about these things. That doesn't happen by accident. It's because at the beginning, I know that those things need to have a purpose. I show photos of me as a child because it makes people feel for me. It creates humanity, creates a sense of connection. The photo of the work I do with Apple creates validation that I actually know what it is that I'm talking about. Like, everything there has a purpose. Nothing is wasted. There's not a slide that has not been there put very, very deliberately. And it's the same thing whenever I'm working with customers. There is everything that is about attention control, taking them on that journey, making sure that everything supports that. And if there is something that doesn't, it is out. Because that's the thing for me. Attention is finite. There's no reason why people have to sit through your whole talk or your whole presentation or be sure that they love it. So everything has to have a purpose. I think the other thing, and so this was actually a trick, it's been talked about publicly. I had first heard about it during that work that I was doing with Apple, where I got to work with a bunch of the people who used to work with Steve Jobs whenever he was doing his keynotes. And they started to talk, I'd always hear this number 7, and they talked about 7 a lot. And so at one point I sat one of them down. I said, can you explain to me what the 7 thing is? And they said, well, what Steve would always do is that every keynote had to be practiced at least 7 times. And I know since then, a lot of other CEOs, a lot of executives, a lot of other public speakers use this rule. Because if you practice your talk, your pitch, whatever it is, 7 times, by the time you've done that and gotten to the end, you're going to have confidence in the material. You're going to understand the transitions. You're going to understand what it is you need to do. So then it's about how do you present it, sell it, put emotion into it. It's about the delivery and the performance of it. But for a lot of people, they're like, oh, great, let's slap it together at the last minute and then just go in and we'll see what happens. Again, the same way that everything has to have a purpose, this is, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, a performance. And so you need to put in the time and the work to get it right. And look, yeah, if this is just a simple design critique or something simpler, yes, go ahead and wing it, have at it. But for again, if these are these bigger things, there is going to be no substitute for actually going through and practicing. And here's the other thing I'll tell you, the other trick, record it. Do this. Everybody's got an iPhone, everybody's got a smartphone, because the thing that you're going to find is that you think you're really smooth. You think that you're doing it really well. Watching this is horrific. Every time I hear myself on my podcast, every time I watch one of these videos, I don't understand what the hell is this hand doing? Why does it keep doing this sort of thing? Why do I keep doing this to the cat? Like, there's all of this stuff that happens that it feels to me in the moment like it's going so well. But when I go back and watch it, whoo, that's a dumpster fire. But I think that's the thing, right? Is that if you think about it, whenever you're selling, pitching, presenting, public speaking, you're never fully in the moment. Because right now, my brain is about 1 sentence ahead of my mouth, right? So I'm sitting here talking, my brain is saying, okay, what's the next setup? What am I doing next? Where am I going next with this sort of thing? And a lot of times that's why people struggle with public speaking or doing this sort of stuff, because that gap between where their brain and their mouth is at causes so much anxiety that they just start to really struggle with those things. But that's why in a lot of cases, whenever you're able to practice, you get much more comfortable with the gap because you know where you're going. You're not sort of making it up on the fly. And whenever you do that, you get much better at a lot of these things. And here's sort of a real nuanced thing. And this is more probably for the selling side. But again, even if you're doing public speaking in smaller venues, this is an important thing to learn. So I studied with a lot of different disciplines, a lot of different things. And so I got into certain areas where you would start to, it was weird. Whenever you start to talk to interrogators or some public speakers or very obviously diverse fields, they would start to, again, talk about this 12 feet versus 4 feet. And so again, being curious, I'm like, look, can somebody explain to me the 12 feet versus 4 feet thing and what this is? What it is that if you are inside of 4 feet from somebody, you are in what is considered their personal space. See, even over a video, doesn't this feel weird and uncomfortable? Partially because there's a box in the middle of my head. But that's the thing, is like if you get really close to somebody, it's uncomfortable because all of a sudden you're like, ooh, it feels like they're inside my personal space. So that obviously is, most of the time you want to stay at least 4 feet away from somebody. But the other end of that is 12 feet, which is that if somebody is more than 12 feet away from you, they are in what they will consider, their brain considers disconnected space, meaning that I am physically far enough away from you that if I want to check my phone, if I want to do those other things, I'm far enough away that there isn't that physical proximity where I feel like I really have to be present. So if you're ever going in and presenting in a big board meeting or in a big room, stand in the middle because you want to keep the spacing the same. If you ever have a customer or a client who is really problematic, maybe they have all kinds of objections, maybe they're being really disruptive, maybe they actually just need some reassurance. Use the 4 feet to go stand next to them. Use the physical proximity to try to get them a little bit under control or to try to comfort them. So again, that they feel better about the work. But if you understand even how do you manipulate physical space, it will make you better at presenting. It's why most of the time whenever I present, this is obviously different, I stand. Because I can dynamically edit the physical space. I can move around, I can walk around to be further or closer to people depending on what's going on in the room. And since I'm standing, it disguises what I'm doing. Most people have no idea that this is like a narrative that's actually going on in my head. They just see me sort of pacing around the room. But again, there's a very deliberate reason in everything I do with this. And again, that's a bit more of like a Jedi mind trick thing, but it definitely works. But let's spend a minute to talk about your style. So style is interesting, mostly because it is so personal. Just like leadership, just like creativity or any of those things, the challenge here is going to be your style, how you present, what works for you is going to be unique for you. But I think there's a few things here again that are going to help, hopefully be able to help you understand some of these things. The first one, and we mentioned this before, is that no matter what your style is, the way that I've always approached this is, and again, whether I'm in front of 2 people in a conference room, 20, 2,000, 20,000 people, whatever that is. I always go into this thinking about like it's a performance. I need to be able to go in, I need to be able to deliver, I need to be able to connect with the audience, I need to do a lot of the things that you see happen in a performance. And that mindset for me, that shift of, and what we sort of said before, of like going from presenting to selling or going from presenting to selling and performing, has made me realize that I need to be a little bit different, especially, again, if you're in a big room, you're more than 12 feet away from people, this needs to become more animated. The voice needs to become bigger. You need to project more energy to keep people involved, because if it's monotone, if I don't move, if I just sit here and talk like this the whole time and you think that this is really interesting and gee, isn't this great as we go, right? Nobody wants to listen to that, right? You would have stopped 30 seconds into this video if I'd have talked like that. But that's the thing, is to understand this is a performance. You need to engage the audience. You need to be able to go in to sell and perform. Again, that mindset makes a huge difference. But the other part, and this is sort of what I mentioned before, is that there's not going to be a magic bullet to this. There wasn't one thing that I did. There wasn't one thing that I was like, oh, that all makes sense now. Oh, that all of a sudden made the difference. It was a lot of work. It's a lot of figuring out what does and doesn't work for you. What's the sort of voice you want to be able to use? What are the aids? What are the things that are going to be able to help you? And so that's sort of the tough part. I think that's why a lot of people get frustrated with it, is you're just going to have to try. You're going to have to be uncomfortable a bunch and see, hey, that worked. Do more of that. Hey, I didn't like that. Don't do so much of that. But a lot of it for me starts with your personal style. And what that means is whenever somebody watches you, just like a brand, just like anything else, whenever they walk away, what are they going to remember? What are the things that they're going to say, oh, I really loved the honesty, the passion, the humor, the energy? Like, again, whatever that was, like, what are those sort of things that are going to be you? And again, I think whenever you talk about a performance, and we'll talk about this in mistakes, don't go to suddenly just making somebody up, right? Like all of a sudden you're an actor or something. It needs to be you. It needs to be authentic. Because especially as you get better than this, that ability to try to be somebody else and be yourself is exhausting. It doesn't work. But I think whenever you talk about this, I think one of the best models that I ever found was if you look at how do TED Talks, how do they actually look at finding the style and sort of the approach of speakers? And there's 3 different types that they use. The first one is the educator. And these are people who just fundamentally want to share information. They want to educate you. They want to make you better. It really is just about coming out and sharing research, coming out and sharing those sort of things. But whenever you walk away, you're like, wow, I really learned something. And again, that can take a bunch of different forms, but it really is about teaching people something so that they feel like, yeah, that was cool. I'm now smarter for having done that. The next one is the entertainer. And maybe it's a comedian. Maybe it's somebody with a lot of energy. Maybe it's somebody who's going to, they're going to be able to convey that information, but it's fun. It's different. Maybe they did something quirky. Maybe they did it in a different way. It's something where, again, you're feeding off that energy, and the way that they're doing it is funny. It's entertaining. It's just going to be like probably the way we think more about a traditional performance. And then finally, there's going to be people that they'll describe as the change agents. These are people that are very inspiring. They have a very aspirational vision. They're going to talk about some sort of state in the future. They're going to talk about the way things could be and how, again, what are the things that they want to do to bring about that reality. Now, the thing that I've always tried to think about whenever I sit down and whenever I put a pitch together for a client or whenever I put together a public talk is that I want to try, for me, to actually move through or have all 3 of these present in any of those things. I want to be the educator, to take them on the journey, to make them feel like they learned something, to provide some insight maybe they didn't have before. I want to be the entertainer, and that I don't want it to be dry. I want it to be something where you actually feel like you're engaged, where maybe, again, if I'm working on the inside of a team, you look forward to my meetings because you know they're going to be fun, they're going to be different. It's going to be something where, again, I've got you in the right mindset before we've even said a word. And then again, with the change agent, a lot of the times, especially when I'm selling work, you want to be able to talk to them about what is the current state. What is their website, their app, their, like, whatever that is, what does it look like now? And then with this work, what could it be? What could that outcome be? What could that aspirational thing be if we do this? Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't it be great to be able to get these results, to be able to talk in those sort of outcomes and to be the change agent? So for me, the ability to move through all 3 is why I think I've been able to build such sort of a powerful either stage presence or the ability to sell the work that I have, is because for me, again, it's very deliberate in thinking, how am I going to move through these things and be able to create those moments? But to be able to do that, it really comes down to the fact that you also need to find your presentation style, which means to do those things, you need to be comfortable on stage. You need to be comfortable with how you talk. You need to do a lot of different things to be able to deliver that performance. Now, this is, again, where it becomes very individual. Because what you want to think about is simple things. Do you want to write a script of every single word you're going to be able to say? Do you just want to use bullets? Do you want to use presenter notes so that maybe if you're on stage or if you're in the room, you have another screen that has those notes that you can look at that'll help you? For me, I cannot use a script. I sound like public access. I sound terrible because I'm so concerned with reading the right words that I don't give a performance, that there's no connection with the audience, that there's no passion. So for me, I will sacrifice word accuracy, meaning, gee, I really wish I would have said it a different way, for connection with the audience, for passion. It's why, and again, even if you see this, it's why the slides and things like that I use are very minimal. Because I'm at my best when I can riff over it, whenever I can just make it a conversation, whenever I can read the room, read the energy, see the passion, and react to that. So those are the sort of things that I'm doing to be able to do that. And then for me, the slides are just sort of the bullet points or the notes. And again, I've done it, I practiced it, so I know how am I going to get from one to another. I know the flow that I want to use, but sort of what that looks like, what the words are I'm going to use, how passionate, how funny, how serious, how much of a soapbox am I going to be on? Those all change based on, again, my ability to read the room, but that's just for me. I know a lot of other people who write everything out word for word, and you would never know. But for them, that gives them that confidence. But this is that sort of trial and error you're going to need to do to figure out your presentation style. Because I think once you've been able to get those basics down, then yes, you can start to concentrate on, being the educator, being, the person who's the change agent, and be able to be through those personas. But if you're still struggling with, I'm not sure what's on the next slide, you're not going to be able to really deliver on those sort of things. Now, let's then go ahead and talk about what are some of the most common mistakes that I see people make all the time. Now, mistakes is always hard. But the thing is, look, we all make them. And a big part of this process is going to be about you going out and making them. But there's a few that I see all the time, and there's a few that I fall into all the time. So I just want to sort of talk through what are some of those going to be, and then obviously, how the heck do we avoid them? The first one is going to be using what I will describe as see and says. Now, a see and say is, and here, let's use an example. Here's this slide, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to read everything that's on this slide. So you get a growing sense that I don't know the material and you have no sense of confidence about what I'm presenting. What's for dinner? Now, the thing is that there's a few things going on here. One, if I would have wanted this, I'd have bought the damn audiobook. For me to go and see somebody who is giving a live talk, who is presenting, who is selling, I need you to engage with the audience. But what is going on with the audience is that, first and foremost, I can actually read about 2 to 3 times faster than you can talk, which means you probably got to what's for dinner whenever I was about halfway through that slide. Which means that what happens with your audience is they will tune in for a very small amount of time, make sure that you're going to read exactly what's on that slide, and then tune back out, thinking about other things until you get to the next slide, tune back in, read it, so they're actually paying no attention to you. But the bigger problem is, as we talk about a performance, as we talk about that sort of confidence and how the things you're trying to build, I have none of those in you. Because if this is something you know about, if this is work you have done, if this is something you are trying to sell me, if this is something you are standing on stage and trying to present about, and you don't know it any more than the ability to read off that slide, you have no credibility with me. I have no interest in what this is. These are the talks that people get up and leave whenever that's all it is you're going to do. Again, you need to be able to engage them, understand the relationship, whether it's through video, whether it's in a conference room, whether it's standing on stage. This is a relationship that you have with the audience, and that you need to respect that, and this does not respect it. So again, no see and says, no audiobooks. But the other thing for me is that, again, not using builds, because a big part of this, a big part of presenting, selling, any of the things like that, is attention control. What I want you to do the whole time is to pay attention to me, to pay attention to what it is I'm saying, to actually be tuned in and connected with me. Now, you see this all the time, and again, let's do another example. So in this slide, and I see this all the time, where people just dump a ton of information up on the screen all at once. So we'll have some interesting subject, And again, by the first bullet, you're listening to me. By the second bullet, you're reading ahead. By the third bullet, you know where I'm going. By the fourth one, you're checking your email. And by the last bullet, seriously, what's for dinner tonight? Again, you got to the what's for dinner probably about halfway or probably sooner because I vamped a little at the front to be able to go through that. But that's the thing, is whenever I use builds and I bring in each of those bullets one at a time, I'm controlling your attention. Because what I do is I hit the build, the line comes up. You look over at the screen, you scan it, and then you come back to me. Because there's not enough there for you to totally understand it. You need me to give it context and to give it voiceover. Now again, if you're selling your work, this is why I will often have one presentation deck and one leave behind deck. Because if I'm just gonna leave the presentation deck, there's not enough information if somebody takes it to their boss and goes to somebody else with it. So again, I need to put more of that into that. But the problem is, again, if I put all that information into my presentation deck, now I'm getting into see and says, and now it's not gonna work. So again, to be able to do that sort of thing to control people's attention becomes critical. Again, if I'm going through and I'm going to present as a team, whether it's on stage or whether you're selling your work, you have to make sure that you are doing it with one voice. The example I always use, pretend this is a time whenever we still want to get on airplanes, depends on when you're watching this video, maybe we're flying again, but for right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, so nobody's really signing up to be able to do that, but we'll say you're getting on the airplane and the two pilots are sort of standing in that door to the cockpit whenever you get on, and they're arguing about how they want to take off or fly or land the plane. They've got two very, very different opinions, and they're sort of arguing in front of you whenever you get on the plane. You're going to spend the entire duration of that flight terrified of what it is that they're going to do up there. Whenever you are selling your work or you're presenting on stage as a group, it is no different. Because the thing is, look, disagreements happen. Those sort of things happen. Don't have them happen in those moments, because the problem is, again, I'm not building trust, I'm not building any confidence, I'm not building any sort of credibility with the people I'm selling to or with my audience if all we're going to do is stand up there and argue. Because again, in their head, they're saying, look, why should I listen? They're not even on the same page. Why should I buy into this? Why should I even think about this or lean into any of this? So again, always think about this, that it is important when you go in there. And like I said, it doesn't mean the disagreements don't happen. Just think about what it is, about how important is it for you to be right in that moment, and what are the repercussions that are going to come out of it. Another one, again, real common mistake. If I'm doing this, if I'm talking, if I'm doing this video and I mess up, nobody probably knows about it but me. Because I'm the only one who knows what slides are going to be. I'm the only one who sort of knows what this is going to be. And again, the thing is that for a lot of people, if they mess up, if they miss a slide, if something goes wrong, you'll see them all the time like, oh, sorry, or oh, I didn't mean to do that, or oh, I should have said that a different way, or like, oh, sorry, that shouldn't have been there, or, oh. And again, I don't have, that is breaking my connection with the person that is presenting or with the person that is selling. Because for me, then all of a sudden, I'm very aware that you feel like you don't know what you're doing. I'm very aware that you feel like you don't have command of this material, or a lot of those sort of things that are now going to break that connection. And now all of a sudden, as somebody who I might have really been bought into, I suddenly feel like they don't know what it is they're doing. I suddenly feel like I'm not so sure I want to be able to listen to what it is you're saying because you keep apologizing for everything. So again, that's one of the biggest things that I see people struggle with, is either one, apologizing, or two, as we talked before about that gap between your brain and your mouth, people who aren't uncomfortable with that silence. And a lot of times that's why they get little tics. They say or well, or you know, or, and like, again, about 45 minutes in and you're on about your 100th you start to really notice it. This is why, again, recording it is important, so you start to catch these things so that your brain can start to become comfortable with silence. You can be okay with the pause without having to fill every single second with something to say. And again, a lot of that just comes from practice. But we mentioned this a little bit before. I think the other big problem I see is somebody trying to be somebody else. You can see they watched a TED Talk, or there's a comedian they really like, or they listen to a podcast or somebody that they really connect with. So they get on stage and they try to use their structure or their cadence or talk like them or use their emotions, and it's not authentic to them. Well, that tends to be the problem, is whenever I'm trying to pretend to be somebody else and either sell you my work or be able to give a talk, I can't do those two things because at some point it's going to break, or it's just exhausting to be able to do. So the thing is to be authentically you, even if that's uncomfortable, even if that's hard. And again, we've done videos on imposter syndrome and a lot of other things for those reasons, because look, it's an understandable thing to be able to have happen. But to go up and be authentically yourself, that'll be the most powerful and the shortest way to becoming really good at this. And so let's actually wrap up with one final thought to all of this stuff. So this is where a lot of people ask me, like, well, Steve, what what's the secret or what's the trick, or sort of like how should we think about this? And this for me has always come down to one single piece of advice. And we've already touched on it a bunch as we've gone through this. So this shouldn't hopefully be a surprise. But for me, whenever you want to sell your work, whenever you want to sell yourself and be on stage and give a talk, right, to be able to sell what it is you're doing, the thing that you are selling more than anything is trust and confidence. Because that's the thing, is I'm asking you to buy into an idea. I'm asking you to buy into this content or to buy into what it is that I'm saying. And for me, anything that I do that adds to you having trust and confidence in me, in what I'm saying, in what it is I've created, is the direction I want to be going. Anything that takes away from that, the arguing, the, again, being unsure, the ums, anything that erodes that trust and confidence, because I think for too many of us, we think that the real product that we're selling in that moment, pixels, words, design, whatever it is you create, whatever it is you do for your living, that's what you think it is. And look, that's definitely a part of it. But it's that ability to get, if you're selling to somebody, you get them to trust you, to take a leap, to be able to risk something, to say, hey, look, yeah, I think I can see where this is going to go. I believe that, again, maybe you don't have all the answers, but I can see you're definitely thinking about it. Or again, for an audience to trust, to have confidence, to really engage with you, to lean in, to be able to listen, to take it in. Because again, it's not just conveying information. If you connect with people, if you really put on that performance, if you really make it something that is engaging, you can help them, you can change them, you can do some really different, really profound stuff that really helps with a lot of those sort of things. But again, to be able to do that, there has to be a level of authenticity that goes with that. And again, it is all about this sort of trust and confidence. And that's why I said, I think so many of us get caught up in the executional. And it's understandable why. But for me, the biggest secret to this, the biggest way to master it, is to look at everything you do, to be deliberate, to understand your presentation style, to think about it as a performance, but to have that be in service of building trust and confidence. Because that's my thing, is when you pay into that, whenever that's the sort of thing that people get really excited about, selling that work becomes so much easier. Being able to get an audience to be able to really connect with you becomes so much easier. And you get better at it because you become a lot more comfortable and you're not thinking about the executional aspects of it. But I think if you think about those things, those should be the things that probably really make the difference the most. Because those are going to be the things that are going to help you master these sort of things. So that's what I want you to be able to do, is to go out, to think about how many of those are you doing, to actually try some of them out. Just do this. Just set up a camera, set up your iPhone and just start. Just start recording. Just start seeing what's it like. What do you look like? What are those sort of things that are actually happening? Because I think when you do that, that's what's the most enlightening. Is because then you can start to really understand yourself a lot more. You can start to understand that, again, it's about how I position my involvement in respecting the work that I've done, in respecting this talk, in respecting my audience, in doing that. That's what really brings it home more than anything. So hopefully this has all been helpful. Hopefully you can go out and put it to use. Do me a favor. Actually, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. So if you like this video and want to get more like it, definitely hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell so you get more videos whenever this come out. Hey, check out the channel. Check out the podcast. I have 100 episodes of the podcast that cover a lot more material just like this and a bunch more. A lot more videos dealing with things like imposter syndrome and a lot of different things like that. But hey, I hope this has been helpful. I hope that, again, if you've got any questions or comments or things like that, throw them down in the comments. Again, I'm happy to answer and help out with this stuff. Or throw a link into a video. I'm happy to help you again, what do I think maybe you could do better? But like I said, go out there, give it a try, get better at it. And as always, stay crazy.